Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
Good morning, Nashville. It is 5:06 a.m. We are broadcasting live from our studios on Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee. It is Tuesday, May the 11th, 2021. We have lots of news to talk about, but first, before we get to the news, it's 5:06 a.m. We have two guests in the studio. Can you believe that? Who would be crazy enough to get up and be in the studio at 5:06 a.m.? I see one of our guests, Tim Izzy Israel, is just starting to wake up. He's spent a lot of time walking around America. Good morning, Izzy.
Hello. Thanks.
Izzy, where are you from?
Originally from Georgia. I live outside of Nashville in Hartsville.
You live in Hartsville, Tennessee. And we're going to talk a little bit about your walking adventures in just a minute. Before we do that, we want to get to our other guest in studio. Again, another crazy person here at 5:07 now in the morning. How was it? What time did you have to get up here? Jeff Tillman with the U.S. Term Limits. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Well, I kicked the alarm over at about 4 a.m. We were at a campground out at just about 30 miles outside of town, and
oh, so you made it here. That's you had to...
Well, he walked to that point. I believe the morning before we started Murfreesboro, and then he walked north, and I went ahead of him and got to the campground and reserved our spot, and they were very helpful and said no charge. We believe in what you're doing, and it got better from there.
Now you are a Yankee, right? You're from Fremont, Michigan.
Everybody has a little of my hometown. It's Gerber Baby Foods. That's our claim.
Michigander.
I'm Michigander, absolutely.
Well, I must confess, I was born a Yankee too, but I saw the light and I moved to Tennessee. Moved here back in 1991, but born and raised in upstate New York. Upstate New York, we're not too different from Michigan.
It's geographically, it's a pretty area.
You just scoot across Ontario, right? And
yep.
And
it's a short drive.
A short drive through St. Joachim and all that parts.
That's right.
Well, so the question here is, what brings you, Izzy Israel, into our studios at now it's 5:09 a.m. on May the 11th? There's a story here to be told. Tell us what the story is. Tell us your walk around across the United States. Where were you living when the idea hit you? Why are you doing it? And where and when did the walk begin?
Well, I've been here on Music Row plenty of times back in the 90s. It was interesting to be back here. Reminds me of dropping off session players to do sessions.
So you have a background, and when you say dropping off session players, what were you doing? Were you driving a taxi? What were you doing? Were you
driving a box truck and setting up? I don't want to say any names, but a lot of guys that cut albums back in the 90s stored their equipment over at Soundcheck on Cowan Street.
So you've got deep roots here on Music Row.
Very much so. Yeah.
Well, you can say some names. What do you name drops?
Well, I mean,
all the nice
session guys. I mean, everybody knows them because they
good
are
sessions guys.
Yeah, Brent Mason.
So
Dan
session
Huff.
guys.
Yeah.
So you've got where are you from originally?
Georgia, Southwest Georgia.
And
Albany.
how did you make it up here to Nashville? What are you, a music guy? You love music?
Yeah. Originally, I went out to Seattle and thought I was a bass player until I actually saw talented people play.
Now let me just stop for a moment. Everyone in our listening, Scooter's going, oh yeah, oh yeah. You're going, oh yeah, because everyone, if you're from Fremont, Michigan, as you are, or if you're from upstate New York, as I am, there's always somebody in town who's just great at music. They're great. They're the best ever. Well, they're the best ever in a little town in upstate New York. They're the best ever in a little town in Georgia, the best ever in a little town in Michigan. But Izzy, when they come to Nashville, they learn humility. Am I right?
Yes.
Because, and so you were a bass player.
I thought I was.
Well, see, now, but when you go and you listen to And in your little town, you were probably a really good bass player, right?
All right, I thought.
Yeah. You're modest. You were good. I know you were good. I can tell. But you come up into Nashville, and you listen to people that played bass for a living, and you think, what do you think?
Well, a good friend of mine that's helping me out with this project, the first time he took me out to see anybody, I walked out in tears, and it wasn't even the bass player that was supposed to play. It was a guy named Keith Horn that played for Tanya Tucker, and he was filling in for Victor Wooten.
And you were in tears because he was so good?
Yes.
And the other part of the tear might be, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what it was?
It was that, yes. Yeah, he was laughing.
This is a story that many people in our listening audience have experienced, Izzy. That's for sure. We'll be back more with Izzy Israel and his walk across the United States. Where did it begin? Why is he doing it? This is the Tennessee Star Report. I'm Michael Patrick Leahy.
Welcome back to the Tennessee Star Report with your host, Michael Patrick Leahy.
5:18 a.m. broadcasting live from our studios on Music Row. In studio with us at this early hour, Tim Izzy Israel from Hartsville, Tennessee, who's got quite a story to tell us about his walk across the United States in support of a project here that is near and dear to many of you, including our good friend, State Representative Chris Todd, also in studio. Jeff Tillman with U.S. Term Limits. Jeff, briefly tell us in about 30 seconds what U.S. Term Limits is about.
U.S. Term Limits has been working to establish term limits throughout the United States at the federal level, U.S. Congress, and there was a ruling by the Supreme Court in 1995 that said that we have to do that with a constitutional amendment. And so we're working at the state level to encourage states to pass a resolution requiring Congress to call for convention to propose resolution.
So you want to go for an Article 5 convention to do that, as opposed to have Congress pass the amendment.
And we're up. We also work in Congress with a lot of our supporters that are in office, and we do get it up.
And what would the amendment say specifically? Would you limit? I think I've heard proposals that would limit terms in Congress and the House of Representatives to 6 consecutive terms, and then the Senate to 2 terms of 6 years each. Is that right? Or
well, the polling shows that most of the public likes 3 House terms.
3 House terms?
That'd be a total of 6.
Yeah.
And 2 Senate terms.
2 Senate terms, total of 12 years.
So they get 18 overall altogether.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Jeff. And turn our attention now to Izzy Israel from Hartsville, Tennessee. How did you, Izzy, get involved in U.S. term limits, and what is it that you're doing to draw attention to this?
Well, originally I'm not politically motivated. I've been bothered by the ethical fact that legislate means to create or make laws, and the fact that in a free country, leaders have the possibility of making and creating laws for their lifetime. They even have that possibility. And then once you see 97% of PAC money go to the incumbent, then, you know, when people say term limits, they get all wrapped up in the number of years. But to me, it's how many times is it possible for you to get elected?
To get elected, right. That makes sense in terms of what you guys are trying to accomplish at U.S. term limits. Now, Izzy, what were you doing for a living before you started being involved with U.S. term limits?
I was a good old roadie.
You were a roadie?
Yeah.
And so you've been, that's a tough life. I mean, that's a lot. It's fun, but it's a lot of work, isn't it? Yeah. When you say a roadie, tell our listening audience, what does a roadie do? Well,
they do different things. People don't use the term anymore much because, everybody's gotten specialized. I always took a little bit of pride in it myself because that's how I learned everything back in the old days. Sold merch, drove trucks, drove bus.
Whatever somebody, if a musical artist based in Nashville needed something to get the job done, to do a tour, to perform in a concert, to make money, you were on the team that did that.
That's correct.
A multi-talented roadie.
Yes, I became specialized too, but I still
What'd you end up being specialized in?
backline.
What does that mean?
It means the guy that takes care of the amps, the instruments, tunes all the instruments, changes the instruments with the performers during the show. Very hands-on, very
well. The back
personal
now
music.
that would be a very sensitive job, right? Because you got to get it right.
It is. It is, but like I said, I thought I was a player once, so it's easy for me to be sensitive to what they want. 'Cause
Exactly.
I like
And you enjoyed being a roadie.
that. I did. I like music, so I hate to see the show suffer.
So what happened? What brought you off the road, and how did you decide to do your current walk? And we'll talk about that in a moment. When did the idea of doing a walk to promote U.S. term limits come to you?
The fall of last year,
The fall of last year.
2020.
And okay, so 2020. This was now COVID had already hit. Is that right?
Correct.
So there's not a lot of work for roadies.
That's correct.
So okay, when did the moment of inspiration come to you, and when did you reach out to the guys at the U.S. term limits?
The moment of inspiration, if you want to call it inspiration, is more discussed. Pretty much was somewhere in July, and I was kind of thinking about my youngest kids are 19, my twins, and I was thinking what my wife and I would do if they were in 3rd and 4th grade, and we both had jobs. And when I learned about COVID, pretty much was the last gig that I had last year was March the 2nd in Denver. And then we flew home, and I saw the devastation of the tornado on the ground flying in, and then we land to find out that this COVID thing is bigger. Sometimes you live in a bubble out there, on buses and stuff, and you don't realize what's going on as to the fullest extent that maybe the media might present it to mainstream population. And it was strange. We had no more gigs, and
Weird.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you a personal experience here. So you probably never heard of these guys, but my last name is Leahy, and we've got my dad was born in Canada, in Quebec. There is a musical group. They used to perform open for Shania Twain. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. It's a group called Leahy.
I know them.
Distant relatives of mine, probably 6 cousins or something like that. But they favor, in terms of physical appearance, they're very talented. And they were coming down here February 28th for a gig at Franklin Theater, and we promoted the you-know-what out of it because, of course, they're family, right? Mm-hmm. They're fabulous. And we had a great concert there at Franklin Theater. And as they were driving home, they just missed that tornado by about 2 hours. Wow. And but that was the last time they performed live, February 28th, 2020, because of all the COVID stuff. So I understand what you're talking about.
It has devastated the music industry.
Yeah, it really has. So there you're at home for a couple months, and then the idea comes, hey, I'm going to promote U.S. term limits. Did you know Jeff and the guys at U.S. term limits at that time?
I did not.
So how did it come about that you decided to walk across the United States? Where did the walk begin? And how did you hook up with the guys at U.S. term limits?
Okay, well, the idea was born out of a childhood friend and mine. We're talking about we've talked about it before. I went back to Georgia when my father died in 2011, and I always stayed with him. And he was one friend that I had when I was a kid. And through the years, each time we talked, mostly around a fire, we talked about what's wrong, why doesn't it change? And he and I both agreed that it was because our legislative branch does not have term limits, meaning they can be incumbent forever. And, he and I started batting around the idea to walk together across the country, and it...
So this has been around for a long time, in your mind?
The irritation of it has been, yeah.
I like the way that he says that, the irritation of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but now how does this then turn in from irritation into action?
He dropped me off in Key West, and, he...
Oh, hold it. He drove you down to Key West. How did you decide to start in Key West?
That was his idea a little bit back when he was talking about walking it with me, and then
Well, hold it.
he backed out.
This is your best friend
Yeah,
who says, let's walk across America together.
yeah.
And what he does is he drives you down to Key West, Florida. He drops you off and says, good luck, buddy.
Yeah, well, he invested in it though. I mean, he helped me. He and another friend, they threw the money in to get me a camera and the camping equipment that we thought, that
Yeah.
you would need to do something like this.
And before we come back, well, I'm gonna put this question out and think about it through the break.